Urban Crag Climbing Center is a rock gym located in Dayton, Ohio, with 8,000 feet of textured and sculpted vertical terrain ranging from 28 to 56 feet. For more info, go to urbancrag.com or call 937-224-CRAG.
I've been on the Ed Churchill a bunch of times, and I like it. You know, he's my kind of guy. You know, he's been fighting this fight before I got involved, at least. But, you know, he asked me on air, like, how do you do this? I'm like, you tell the truth. That's it. Like, you don't need talking points. You don't need, you know, lobbyist memos and Frank Luntz's bullshit and all that. Just tell the truth. It's really easy. It turns out lying takes a lot more effort than just telling the truth. Mm-hmm. So you do your research, you know your facts, and then they scream socialist at you because they have no facts. Because all their research is just sophistry. You know, it's just made-up, manufactured bullshit meant to distract you from what's really going on. They're robbing you.
It's not just Detroit.
It's everywhere. It's everywhere.
See,
and if it hasn't hit your town yet, it's going to. Mm-hmm. Because what we have is a systemic flaw within the structure of our economic system right now. We have a systemic flaw where the money does not trickle down. If the entire premise of our economy is that get the rich guy rich and everybody will benefit, well, it's been 30 years. It doesn't work. Stop doing it. Mm-hmm. The reality is when we support working class families, then America prospers altogether.
So how would you, okay, if they made you King Daddy next week and were like, you know, okay, man, fix it.
Fix it.
Make all, you know, fill these neighborhoods up, stop this just rampant, you know, criminality going on, you know, joblessness, fill in the blanks. I could go on and on and on.
What would I do if I had like total control, which I don't want, but if I did, hypothetically, there's a bunch of policy points that I think make a lot of common sense. From the economic stand, I would say we have to have a strict enforcement of the Volcker Rule, which forces the banks to leverage themselves against the loans they make. We need to bring back Glass-Steagall, which separates the investment banks from the saving banks. The idea that banks are too big to fail is just insane. And I told people, if money equals speech and the banks are too big to fail, that's oligarchy. That's just total corporate power in the top 1%. So we need to get rid of campaign finance reform. And I'm not even talking about bringing back McCain-Feingold. I mean something bigger than that. We need to end corporate personhood. We need to end this notion that money equals speech. It doesn't work. It's the bribing of our politics. I tell people, campaign finance, to me, it's the linchpin of everything. The reason that there's an incentive for them to let the banks rob you is because they want the banks to fund their campaigns. The reason there's an incentive for them to drill, baby, drill is because the oil guy's funding his campaigns. Senator James Inhofe from Oklahoma is the guy who goes around the world talking about climate change as a hoax. And his number one campaign contributor is the coal industry. There's a reason that he behaves this way. He's been bribed to do so. So when it comes to the political aspect of things, it's important because that sets the framework that the economy works within. And the reason that framework is skewed is because our congressmen have been bought. The presidential election is turning into an auction at this point. So we need the campaign finance reform. We need it now. But when it comes to on-the-street issues, I think we need infrastructure. $4 trillion worth of infrastructure is what they've said that America needs. I'm talking rebuilding bridges, rebuilding schools, outfitting them with solar panels so that they're energy sustainable. High-speed rail, a number of $4 trillion. Are you kidding me?
We're in a state here where the Republican governor, first thing he did when he got into office was say, no, the rail project's not going to come through Dayton or Ohio for that matter. And there was quite a few people who were pretty excited about the fact that, I don't have to take that, white knuckle drive to Cincinnati on 75 or go to Columbus.
Oh, they did that in the state right next door to me in New York. Governor Chris Christie, who I refer to as the Penguin, since he looks like an obese bad guy from the Batman films. But his first move was to kill a train that would have connected New Jersey and New York. So, when the Republican governors won their elections in 2010, to me they had a very clear plan, which is break it. If it ain't broke, break it, and then blame it on Obama. So that way, all these jobs programs that would have benefited their economy in their local states, they said, we want this president to look bad. We hope he fails. So we're going to put the kibosh on all this stuff. And then when there's no job growth, we can turn around and blame him for it. To me, there's a very clear plan that they've had since 2008. Which is to make things as bad as possible and blame Obama. And not to say that Obama's blameless. There's a lot of things that he could have done differently that I would have wished he'd have done. Breaking up the too big to fails, taking back the Bush tax cuts that have just been a disaster and created these huge deficits that they use to justify these cuts. But the Republican Party from day one has had a plan. Blame it on the black guy. And they knew that if Obama could fix the mess that Bush left behind, they were finished. So they said, we're going to throw a monkey wrench in the works. We're going to make sure nothing gets fixed so we can blame everything on it. And that's why when you see things working out for America, that they don't like that. I tell people, I used to support George W. Bush. Because I'm a Republican or a Democrat. Because when he was president and our country was attacked, that was the time where you put party aside and you say, I'm an American first. You know what I mean? Whether you're a Democrat or Republican or independent or whatever, you're an American first. And I tell people, I didn't agree with the way Bush did things, but I said, I hope they get it right. I hope in 4 or 8 years that their ideas work and we're a better country for it. And when that didn't work, a lot of people were like, I can't believe they're messing this up. I can't believe they're lying us to Iraq.
But really, wouldn't that really guarantee, knowing the physical, topography, cultural or I'm not sure the right term, cultural landscape, of the whole region, that had Americans been even faintly knowledgeable of cultures there, subcultures, conflicts within the region that have gone back a long time, no one would have said, go just fly on in there. And the complexity
of shock doctrine. It was all shock doctrine. We didn't go in there to save the people from Saddam. We went in there to make a profit for Bechtel and Halliburton and the big corporations that were going to privatize every state-owned industry in Iraq. And the fact that they're talking about doing the same with Iran now is startling. Because if you're like me, you remember things that happened yesterday. I think that the corrupt politicians count on us not remembering one day to the next. So if these are the guys who are lying us into Iraq, then lying about death panels, then lying about tax cuts for the rich equals jobs, 3 strikes are out. But when you go beyond that, they've been lying about trickle down. They've been lying about all of this stuff. Deregulation, privatization. All of it sucks for working class people. And all of it is outstanding for the rich. So when your entire policy platform benefits only the 1%, and when you have candidates who flat out say, not very concerned about the very poor, well, you know what? 45% of American families are one paycheck away from poverty. If you don't care about damn near 2/5 of your country, you're not qualified to run as president. And I tell people, even though I'm a New Yorker, I try not to badmouth certain regions because I understand maybe I don't agree with those people politically, but they're still Americans,
Once, Kierkegaard said, once you label me, you negate me. So, once you give someone a label, then you basically just said you're that other which I have defined for you instead of you defining yourself. So
this is cool. I don't get to do too many interviews with guys who quote Kierkegaard, so cheers right there, brother. If only the guys from Fox were that literate, they wouldn't necessarily be.
Yeah, and they think it's flyover country here. There's there's all kinds of stuff. This is the birthplace of funk music and all kinds of cultural and
this, it reminds me of where I grew up. It reminds me of where I grew up. It reminds me of the families I still stay in touch with. And this is what matters. Wall Street does not need more welfare. They do not need more corporate welfare. They do not need more advantages over everybody else. States like Ohio, like where I grew up, upstate New York, not Manhattan, but I mean upstate New York. All across the country, man, there are working class families who are under pressure. And it is our job as patriots and their fellow countrymen to try to help our neighbors. That's what community is.
Anyway, like I was saying, Chris Christie, I'd like to bully him back.
Oh, yeah.
He's a total bully, and why hasn't the left employed a little bit more of that strategy, using bully tactics to promote the overall good when it comes in political spectrum?
In my opinion, it's a campaign finance reform issue. And I'm firmly convinced that the Democratic establishment would rather lose elections than make their big donors upset. Now, I have a little bully pulpit, but I know how to use it, okay? And one thing my mother used to always tell me is kill them with kindness. If you smile and you keep your tone of voice even, you can say just about anything you like to people. But there's sometimes where it's right to get mad. There's sometimes where your outrage is justified and your anger is righteous. So I say, be kind to someone. Give them enough rope. But once they hang themselves, smack it down. If Chris Christie were to mouth off at me, I'd be smacking the table. I'd be yelling in his face. Yeah. You work for me. You don't fucking mouth off, pardon my language, but...
And yeah,
You're a public servant. Go get me a glass of water.
He's always yelling at like school teachers.
Because he's a bully. He's a coward.
How come he doesn't like bring veterans into his press conferences?
That's why they behave the way they do, because they're absolute cowards. They are terrified of having someone pushed back in their face. That's why they pick on women. That's why they pick on minorities. That's why they pick on LGBT folk, because they're used to those people not mouthing off. And I swear, if you gave me the chance, I would love to make his acquaintance, because I don't think I'm the kind of guy he's going to ask him, hey, my health insurance, I can't afford it. He turns around and says, well, you can afford an iPad. Yeah, not every month, asshole. This is a real question. Mm-hmm. You can't look at me like, oh, it's your fault. You can't afford things. I'm like, well, you're the one advocating policies that make my health care more expensive. You're the one advocating policies that make my paycheck lower. You cannot do this and push people into poverty and then claim ignorance. Although at least if they claimed ignorance, we'd know where they actually stand on matters, but that's another matter altogether.
Well, wouldn't they have, if they're taking that ideology that it's your fault, would they then not have to, so that the American population is dysfunctional and unable to take care of themselves, following that logic that it's your own fault? Well, obviously, there's so many people around who can't do that, so therefore, going by Republican logic, they think the American populace is half dysfunctional.
Well, they like to call themselves the party of personal responsibility, but if you ask them to take any credit for this disaster during the Bush years, they don't know what you're talking about. There's this blind spot. It went Clinton. I don't remember those 8 years. Obama. But more to the point, it's a way of blaming you for your own poverty. I got rich, and I got rich because I'm good. I'm like, no, you didn't. You're part of the Lucky Sperm Club. You inherited your money. If your daddy was successful, you didn't earn that. Your father was successful. Not to say that some people can't take what their fathers built and grow upon that. But you know what? You had an advantage. You had an advantage because you're an American. And because you had that advantage, because you're an American, you owe it back to the next kid. It's simple as that. I'm not telling you that it's your job to carry me along. I'm telling you that if we're climbing the economic ladder, you're not allowed to stomp on my fingers while I pull myself up to the next rung.
Well, exactly. We have to have some sense of community. We can't just be a bunch of individuals running around ignorant of our neighbor.
Exactly.
Of how people are living.
They sell you this rugged individualism.
The bootstrap myth is...
Oh yeah, I borrowed my bootstraps for a suit months ago, so we're beyond that.
They moved the bootstrap factory to China, down the street.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to me, they use double-sided language, because they're duplicitous liars. But when they talk about we're the party of personal responsibility, that's code word for shut the fuck up and pay your bills.
Right.
Shut the fuck up, don't complain. Be a good peasant, go to work every day, don't make any noise.
And go to church to help you if you want charity, right?
And I tell people, if we really are Christians, why are we not our brother's keeper? Why do you not look at it, and not you, but why don't they look at it like, it's my responsibility to do the right thing? They say let the church do it because it's a way of saying that's not my problem, And at the same time, nothing for nothing, I don't want to knock anybody's faith, but with these guys and their culture wars about contraception and abortion, like nothing for nothing, if you object to your tax dollar paying for contraception for my girlfriend, then I object to my tax dollars paving the streets on the way to your church. But that's petty, and I don't want to get into that. Right. But more to the point, it comes down to greed. And if you asked me to give you the face of the greediest person ever, it isn't Jesus. Jesus was love. Division, hate, that was Pontius Pilate. Jesus wasn't a money changer. He overturned the money changers' tables. Now, these guys are passing laws letting you bring guns in the church. Jesus kicked the Roman Praetorian Guard out of the church for bringing their spears in. He said, this is a temple. We shouldn't bring weapons in here. But that's because the Second Amendment basically codifies the arms industry. If we had a right to health care in this country, it'd be a different matter. If women wrote the Constitution, abortion would be a constitutional right. But the whole thing is they have nothing. They have nothing. They don't want to talk about the issues. They don't want to talk about things that matter. They want to distract you with bullshit. With gay people, black people, Latinos. These are the people who are also Americans. These are the people who are, in a certain sense, the most American because they really help us.
Because they built America.
Yeah, they built America, exactly. So when the Republican Party has their CPAC convention and they invite white nationalists who host a panel on the dangers of multiculturalism, I'm like, holy crap, they're outright admitting that they're racist? Oh, no, we're not racist. There's two things the Republican Party hates, being called racist and black people. Right. And there's a reason for it. There's a reason for it, because that's how they motivate their base. They can't win on issues. They got nothing there. They motivate people to hate. That's it. It's stochastic terrorism. They keep people crazed. They talk about everything in an end of days method. Does that do anything to help America? No, not at all. It does a lot to help the Republican Party. And they've decided that it's more important to be Republican than it is to be American. And I reject that outright. To me, I don't care what you call me politically. I'm an American first. And if these guys want to tell me that I'm a socialist or this, that, the other thing, you're wasting my time.
Obama just made it legal for the government to detain people indefinitely. He said, oh, okay, well, it's not going to be done in my administration. But should Newt Gingrich get elected, it'll be allowed by him or someone else in that kind of situation.
When they said we're going to look forward on the Bush war crimes, torture, and Guantanamo Bay, we're going to look forward. We can't look back in the past. We have to look forward. And then they started prosecuting whistleblowers. Wait a minute. So when it comes to prosecuting Bush and Cheney and his crowd, we have to look forward. When it comes to prosecuting the guy who pointed out what Bush's crowd was doing, oh, we got to prosecute that. It's bullshit. And what it really comes down to is that if the Democratic Party wants to be Republican light, then they can't be too mean to the Republicans, because that's the agenda they're really trying to sell us. I tell people, Occupy Wall Street is more frightening for the Democrats than the Republicans. Because we may be exposing the Republicans for who they really are, but they don't care. They're just going to do it anyway. It's not like they have a sense of shame. But we're forcing the Democrats to actually be what they say they are. And they don't want that. That scares the hell out of them. Not to say that they're all bad. You know, I tell people, I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I'd say a quarter of them, maybe a third. No, that's not enough. And part of the reason that we have this utter disaster is because the corporations have bought every single Republican and about a quarter of the Democrats. And they understand that if you buy Ben Nelson, Joe Lieberman, Max Baucus, you buy enough senators and all the other senators are Republicans, you already own them anyway, then you have a governing majority no matter who wins the elections. That's what happened in 2008. Even if we voted for Obama and the Democrats won the White House, the banks still own the Senate. And that's why we couldn't get into real reforms. And they suffered for it. They suffered for it at the elections. But we suffered too, because if you're telling me Ohio would have been better off under this governor than the other guy, obviously it's a no-brainer. You guys have a Fox News governor who decided to cut corporate taxes and to make teachers pay the bill.
Dayton elected John Kasich by staying home, actually. I mean, those are the stats.
But you know what, though?
It's one of the most apathetic cities in America.
Americans are desperate for someone to fight for them. Not for the culture wars, not for the corporations, for working class people. And Democrats need to come home to what their party has always been. The Democrats have always been a labor party, a worker party, a middle class party. I don't even use the term middle class anymore because that's not respectful to people who are below that poverty line. I call it working class. If you come from a family that works for a living, you're working class, and this is a working class country. The Democrats need to stop playing patty cake with the banksters. They need to stop pulling punches on the Republicans. And they need to get out there and fight for working class people. And until they do that, people should be frustrated. But I tell people it's so important to be a voter. And I'm never going to tell you who to vote for. But it's so important to be a voter. Part of the reason that we have this disaster right now is because voter participation in this country is down. Can you imagine how mad it would make the banks if we got that up 10%? Because really the way it works right now is that 22% of the country is Republican that votes for George W. Bush and so on and so forth. And only half the people vote, so that gives them 46 to 50% of the political punch. Now imagine all those working class people who don't give a rat's ass about abortion. They want to talk about how I'm going to get a better paycheck. Imagine if we could get those people to vote again. It would make a big difference. It would make a big difference.
How do you think Occupy is going to attract? One of the things we've noticed, when I've seen it noticed, talked about in the black press as well, is the lack of inner city participation. I don't know about like New York City, but at least Occupy Dayton isn't as racially diverse as the city's demographics. It's approximately 50-50. It's approximately about 50-50 racial mix in the city, black and white. What do you think the Occupy movement can do to get beyond the, I guess you would say, Portlandia stereotype that some people want to
Well, I think part of it is somewhat logistics because Occupy started at Wall Street, and we all know that it's not a very culturally diverse area. And a lot of the encampments were set in places that are politically or economically significant, and that underrepresents communities that don't share the prosperity that the 1% trickles down on the rest of us. And I don't care what your skin pigment is. It's what's in your heart. You know what I mean? And it's pretty obvious that some people in this country don't have a heart. It turns out when you lose your heart, you lose your mind too. No wonder they act like crazy people. But if we're going to combat that, then we need to do it with love, we need to do it with solidarity, and we need to stand by our fellow man. And I think the best way we can do that is starting in our local communities.
Yeah, I think the breakup of a lot of the camps has made that happen.
It has. It absolutely has.
A lot of that food and energy toward maintaining a camp, and has, people are coming home now. Now, we're in a low-income neighborhood here now.
So what do you think this summer? Daryl Issa, I caught him on camera saying that should only have laws for the poor. And I asked him about that in a hallway.
$220 million. It does not surprise me in the least that he said that.
And he ran like a little girl from me. What do you think about that?
I've been to D.C. a bunch of times, and it turns out that Congressman Charlie Rangel's office is on the opposite side of the hall from Daryl Issa. So I went and paid them both a visit. And Daryl Issa's staffers had no idea what to answer me with. They just don't get this. They don't get regular people asking them tough, smart questions. It scares the hell out of them. But I asked this guy. He has a staffer from Goldman Sachs, right? He has a VP of Goldman Sachs on his personal staff. The guy changed his name because he was ashamed of being found out for being a staffer for Goldman Sachs. This guy uses the House Oversight Committee to have witch hunts against President Obama because he's a Democrat, he's an African American, and so on and so forth. But he is absolutely malfeasant in his job. The Oversight Committee is to engage in investigations on criminality in America. How could you not find a single instance of criminality at Wall Street, in the mortgage marketplace, right down the line? You're telling me that there's no corporate crime in America at all? Really? So in New York, my idiot Congressman Peter King is the one who holds trials about religious extremists. And now Daryl Issa is going to hold trials about how we're giving the religious extremists a sad by defending women's rights. You know what? I hate to say it, Republicans, but fuck your hurt feelings. I don't care. We've got too many problems right now. So to me, it doesn't surprise me that Daryl Issa is an absolute shill for the 1% because he is the 1% himself. The guy is literally in the top 0.1%. When we talk about the Buffett rule, Daryl Issa is exactly the kind of guy who should be paying higher taxes. Because you know what? It's not fair that you might make however much you make a year and you pay 35%, and Daryl Issa pays 15%. It's insane. These guys complain about taxes, but they hardly even pay it. That's the funny thing.
Where's the end game of Occupy is going? They seem to have reorganized down here. A lot of the energy here locally kind of. A lot of people, like she said, a lot of people are like, man, all they're talking about is camping all the time. Everything's about camping, and we need to work on these actual problems that are in the city surrounding us. What is the next step for Occupy?
I try not to talk about an end game because to me, I want to see this go on. I think
it's a battle.
Social justice is the end game, and when's that?
Social justice is the end game. I think the end game is an evolutionary force. Changing the way that our system works to better represent the average person. Because I can't afford a lobbyist, so I need to get more involved myself. And I think of the many things that we could do, one of the first things I would love to see become a tradition in America is to have public places to talk to our neighbors. I think that's what scared the Fox. I think what scared the Fox News and the Republican Party more than anything else was that we're actually talking about our problems. They would prefer us to stare at the TV and not talk to each other and be scared and vote out of fear. And, I badmouth Fox and Republicans, but the reality is that this never was like a protest against Fox or a protest against Republicans. It's just they're so tied to the hip with corrupt Wall Street finance that they might as well be running in a three-legged race at this point,
What do you think about, I'm a U.S. veteran with a camera, and I cover local news here in Dayton, Ohio. They never, they fly. They never mention this on the networks or anything. Events like this, and we do neighborhood festivals. Look, government meetings, everything in between. But it seems to be, I've had a situation where it was near a bus stop downtown and here on a public college in an open courthouse space where everywhere I go to do like just basic man on the street reporting, I have police descend upon me, wanting to know if I've got approval and permits, and obviously that. No problem. It's just and we see the institutions claiming private property rights. Any comment on that?
I think
it's not just the Occupy journalists.
There's an excellent author named Naomi Wolf who wrote a book titled Letters to a Young Patriot, 10 Steps to Destroying American Democracy. I think that's the title, give or take. But one of the steps to destroying democracy was antagonizing journalists. And the reality is the media is dominated by a few corporations. It's really a monopoly. About 6 companies control 90% of the media. So you're their worst enemy, because you're taping things and disseminating messages that don't fit their corporate narrative of we need more cuts, we need more tax cuts, we need more free markets, we need more privatization. When you bear witness and carry what is basically a loaded weapon, which is a camera that you can share with other people, that terrifies the hell out of them. And I tell people, one thing that I think Occupy really blew the lid off was that the police state in this country is out of control. I can't understand that the guy whose whole message is economic freedom has no problem with them tear gassing his fellow citizens. Remember that time that a Tea Party guy brought a gun to a protest? I didn't tear gas him. Not that I want them to, but